The evening air over Weatherfield carried a strange tension, as the lights of Coronation Street flickered against the damp pavement, each glowing window hiding secrets that were growing heavier by the hour. Friday night had always brought drama to the street, but tonight felt different from the moment Carla stepped out of the factory office and noticed the police car parked across from Roy's Rolls. Her expression tightened instantly. She had seen enough trouble in her life to recognize the look of gathering disaster before anyone even spoke a word. Inside the café, Roy stood near the counter with his hands folded carefully together while Lisa Swain questioned a shaken young woman sitting beside Mina. Betsy hovered awkwardly by the door, pretending not to listen, even though every word seemed to pull her deeper into the situation. Mina's face was pale, her eyes dark with worry as she kept trying to reassure the frightened girl beside her, but the woman barely managed to answer the detective's questions. Carla entered slowly, immediately sensing the heaviness in the room. Roy looked relieved to see her, though his calm demeanor never fully cracked. Lisa turned toward Carla and gave a restrained nod, before explaining that Lauren's friend had arrived unexpectedly, claiming she had information about Joel's final movements before his disappearance. The mention of Joel instantly changed the atmosphere. Even after weeks of silence surrounding him, the name still carried bitterness through Weatherfield, like poison trapped beneath the pavement. The frightened woman finally spoke louder, explaining that Joel had contacted her days earlier, sounding terrified. He claimed someone was following him and insisted he needed money fast. Carla frowned immediately, because nothing about the story sounded believable anymore. Joel had manipulated too many people for too long. Yet Nina noticed something else hidden underneath the woman's fear. This was not somebody inventing stories for attention. She genuinely looked terrified. Before anyone could continue, Betsy suddenly interrupted, blurting out that she had seen a dark blue van outside the precinct flats earlier that evening. Lisa's expression sharpened instantly. Betsy hesitated under her mother's stare, but continued anyway, admitting she recognized the driver from somewhere, though she could not remember exactly where. The revelation unsettled Lisa enough that she immediately stepped outside to radio for updates, while Carla exchanged a worried glance with Roy. Across the street at the Rover's return, the Friday crowd attempted to cling to normality. Jenny tried keeping spirits high behind the bar, while Glenda entertained customers with exaggerated gossip, but even the laughter felt forced tonight. Sean sat nursing a drink near the window, anxiously checking his phone every few seconds. Dylan still had not returned home, and despite trying to appear calm, Sean's panic was becoming impossible to hide. Gemma noticed immediately. She slid into the seat across from him and gently asked what had happened. Sean finally admitted that Dylan had stormed out after another argument about school and Mason's lingering influence over him. Sean blamed himself for pushing too hard, but Gemma reminded him that teenagers rarely understood how much people cared until things fell apart. Her attempt at comfort helped briefly, though Sean's anxiety returned the moment his phone remained silent. At another table, Sarah sat with Kit Green, the tension between them simmering beneath every word. Their flirtation over recent weeks had become impossible to ignore, though neither fully trusted the other enough to admit what was truly growing between them. Kit leaned back casually, teasing Sarah about avoiding him all week, but she fired back immediately, accusing him of enjoying everyone else's discomfort far too much. Their conversation carried the strange electricity of two people drawn together despite knowing better. Kit's smirk faded slightly when Sarah mentioned David's financial problems. Platt family troubles were spreading again, and rumors about unpaid debts had started circulating around the street. Sarah admitted she feared David was hiding something far worse than money issues. Kit listened carefully, though his expression became unreadable the moment she mentioned Harvey's name. That single detail changed everything. Meanwhile, David himself stood outside the barber shop, staring blankly at a pile of overdue notices spread across the counter. The weight pressing on him had become unbearable. Every solution seemed to create another disaster. Shona tried reassuring him earlier in the day, but even her optimism was beginning to crack under the strain. Max's legal troubles, Lily's growing questions, and the constant pressure from creditors were suffocating him. When the shop door opened behind him, David nearly jumped. Nick entered carrying takeaway coffees and immediately sensed his brother's distress. David attempted sarcasm to deflect concern, but Nick refused to play along tonight. He demanded honesty. For a moment, David looked ready to confess everything, yet pride stopped him again. Instead, he muttered vague excuses about business slowing down. Nick finally lost patience. He slammed the coffee onto the counter and accused David of lying to everyone who cared about him. The argument escalated quickly, years of buried resentment bubbling violently to the surface. David snapped that Nick always acted superior despite making equally terrible decisions throughout his life. Nick fired back that at least he tried fixing his mistakes instead of drowning in them. The confrontation might have become explosive had Shona not entered unexpectedly. She froze instantly upon seeing the brothers shouting. Her disappointment silenced both men immediately. Shona calmly told Nick to leave before turning toward David with tears forming in her eyes. She admitted she no longer knew how to help him because he refused help from anyone. David watched her walk away and suddenly looked more broken than angry. Elsewhere, Dee Dee sat alone in her flat rereading hospital paperwork while the television played unnoticed in the background. Her pregnancy fears had consumed every waking moment recently, and tonight the loneliness felt sharper than ever. She wanted to believe everything would work out, yet uncertainty haunted her constantly. Every medical appointment seemed to create new anxieties instead of reassurance. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Michael stood outside, carrying food and an awkward smile. Dee Dee looked surprised but grateful. Michael admitted he hated the idea of her sitting alone worrying all evening. Though exhausted emotionally, Dee Dee allowed herself to relax slightly in his presence. Their friendship had deepened quietly through shared hardship, and tonight she desperately needed somebody who expected nothing from her except honesty. As they ate together, Michael gently encouraged her to speak openly about her fears. Dee Dee finally confessed how terrified she was that history might repeat itself, that happiness always seemed temporary in her life. Michael listened carefully before reminding her how strong she truly was, though she rarely allowed herself to see it. His sincerity moved her more deeply than she expected. Back at the precinct, Lisa returned with troubling news. Officers had located the blue van Betsy described, abandoned near the canal. Worse still, traces of blood had been discovered inside. Carla's stomach tightened instantly. Mina looked horrified, while Roy quietly asked whether the blood had been identified. Lisa admitted forensic results would take time, but her instincts told her something serious had happened. The frightened woman suddenly stood, trembling violently as she confessed there was something else she had hidden. Days earlier, Joel had claimed he possessed evidence against somebody dangerous in Weatherfield. He intended to expose them unless he received protection. Carla exchanged another glance with Lisa, because both women instantly realized the implications. If Joel truly had evidence, almost anyone connected to his crimes could have wanted him silenced. Betsy quietly stepped backward toward the door, unsettled by the conversation. Lisa noticed immediately and questioned why her daughter suddenly looked nervous. Betsy hesitated before admitting she remembered where she had seen the van driver. He had been arguing with Mason weeks earlier outside the precinct. The revelation landed heavily. Mina looked shocked while Roy frowned thoughtfully. Lisa demanded every detail Betsy could remember. Though frightened, Betsy explained the man had warned Mason to stay quiet about something. At the time, she assumed it was meaningless street drama, but now she was no longer certain. Lisa immediately called for further checks while Carla tried piecing everything together in her head. Across Weatherfield, Mason himself sat alone near the community center steps, smoking nervously, despite promising Dylan he had quit. His expression revealed pure exhaustion. The pressure surrounding him had grown unbearable since his release, and although he tried rebuilding his life, trouble seemed determined to follow him everywhere. Dylan finally approached from the shadows, hands shoved deep into his pockets. Mason looked genuinely surprised to see him. Their relationship remained complicated, scarred by mistakes neither fully understood how to fix. Dylan admitted he had nowhere else to go after arguing with Sean. Mason offered a weak smile and joked that Weatherfield's runaway club was growing larger every week. The humor faded quickly though. Dylan noticed Mason seemed deeply unsettled, and pressed him for answers. After resisting initially, Mason finally admitted somebody had been threatening him recently. A man kept demanding information about Joel and warning Mason to stay silent. Dylan immediately urged him to report everything to the police, but Mason laughed bitterly at the suggestion. Trusting authority had rarely improved his life. Still, Dylan could see genuine fear in his eyes. At the Rovers, Jenny struggled with mounting stress behind the bar. The pub finances remained unstable, despite her efforts to hide the reality from everyone. Glenda sensed her sister's tension, and eventually cornered her in the back room, demanding honesty. Jenny reluctantly admitted bills were piling up again, and she feared another disaster could finish the pub permanently. Glenda softened immediately. Beneath her theatrical personality, loyalty to family always came first. She promised Jenny they would survive somehow, because the Rovers had survived generations of chaos before them. Their emotional moment was interrupted when Daisy suddenly arrived carrying an overnight bag and visible frustration. Jenny immediately sensed trouble. Daisy explained she had argued with Daniel again after another disagreement about the future. Daniel wanted stability while Daisy still felt trapped by expectations she never fully chose. Glenda wisely disappeared upstairs as tension filled the room. Jenny tried calming Daisy, but Daisy's frustration exploded instead. She admitted she no longer recognized herself anymore. Every decision felt shaped by guilt, pressure, or fear of disappointing somebody else. Jenny listened carefully because she understood that feeling better than most. Quietly, she warned Daisy not to sabotage happiness simply because stability felt unfamiliar.